Hi, this is Tim Talks from Shanghai. I'm Timothy Pope, and I'm looking at how China is perceived and portrayed around the world. Electric vehicle makers have really taken center stage in trade disputes between US, Europe, and China in the last couple of months. And there are claims that China is making too many cars, that automakers get too much government support, and that they're going to put the rest of the world out of business. China's currently in negotiations with the European Union to tone down or even to remove tariffs, which go up to 38%, depending on the car maker. China says that this is not only a protectionist move that's based on some faulty assumptions, but also one that is going to really slow down action on climate change around the world. When following this story, I've been reading a lot of coverage from the Financial Times, and that comes from a range of their reporters and correspondents, including, but not limited to, Andy Bounds, Alice Hancock, and Gloria Lee. I think by and large, the reporting has been very fair in tone. After the United States imposed some really sweeping tariffs on Chinese green tech, there were predictions that the EU would be following suit, and some speculation as well that if that happened, Beijing would retaliate with tariffs and anti-dumping investigations of its own. France, Spain, and Italy will continue to champion the EU's tariffs against China, while Germany, Sweden, and Hungary are going to seek support in getting them overturned. But that can't happen until an EU member vote on November the 2nd. But from what I've been reading, if Europe really wants to shut the door to Chinese EVs, especially those that are made by Chinese brands, these tariffs aren't going to do the job. There was some fantastic analysis done on this by the Rhodium Group, which is a research firm, and it describes what they call the EU premium for Chinese car makers. Now, the essence of this is that because of the price war by Chinese EV makers here in China, which is their home market, those Chinese EV makers increase the price of the cars that they export to the European Union. Rhodium's analysis shows that in the case of BYD's Seal U, the company makes a profit of 1,300 euros on every car that it sells in China, which doesn't sound like a lot. The same car sold in the EU makes a profit of 14,300 euros. It's an extra 13,000 euros, more than 100,000 yuan per vehicle. The point of the Rhodium Group analysis is that these tariffs, therefore, simply aren't enough to deter companies from exporting to the EU because they don't erase that EU premium. BYD wouldn't even need to raise the prices that it charges on cars in the EU to continue making a profit. The profits would get squeezed a little, and the EU would bring in a big chunk of import tax revenue. But if BYD doesn't need to pass on the cost of these tariffs to its European customers, then the tariffs really do nothing to protect European car makers, and that makes them effectively pointless. One thing that the FT reporters pointed out is that the EU does need to be able to legally defend any tariffs that it introduces to the World Trade Organization in case they're challenged. So it really can't go all out the way that the United States did and bring in a punitive 100% tariff on cars. The EU tariffs has also differed a little bit from the coverage that we saw when US tariffs were brought in about a month earlier. That's partly because the US tariffs covered a lot more ground than just electric vehicles. And maybe it's also partly because we've been talking about trade wars on and off for years now, really ever since Donald Trump became president of the United States back in 2017. So we just get tired of it a lot more quickly. I know I do. But as far as I can tell, the biggest and most important difference is that market watchers believe that China and the EU can come to some kind of agreement. But almost nobody believes that China and the US can do the same. The EU tariffs seem to be driven a little less by ideology, while some of the US tariffs seem to be designed to send a very specific signal and one that really doesn't have much to do with preventing climate change or even protecting US industry, really. There's one great quote from one FT piece from an analyst at GavCal Research who said, "The US has sent a very clear message that it wants minimum Chinese participation in its green transition." Thankfully, that doesn't seem to be the EU's position. European Commission spokesman Eric Mamer said that he's hoping for an agreement with China so that they don't even need to fully implement these tariffs. Because while there is still some debate over just how much a global transition to EVs can really do to help avert a climate disaster, that technology is still going to be a very big part of Europe's plan to meet its 2030 climate goals. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.